What up, team? Welcome to episode 118 of Chill. That's actually the first time I've seen that new intro. I was enjoying the intro, and then it all of a sudden stopped. We are so last Chill of the year, guys. Last Chill of 2022. My name's Todd. I'm the founder of Overdose, and myself and Paul, who's our group CEO, thought we would jump on and just have a bit of a wrap on the year and talk some smack and see what we think about what's gone on and maybe what's ahead for next year. We are going out live, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. If you jam your comments in there, they will come through to us. Raven's in the background. She'll throw probably not the insults on screen from the rest of the staff, but we'll probably throw up some of the good questions. So if you want to grill us on anything, we're here to answer your questions. Paul, how are you, mate?
Yeah, doing really well. I'd also like to add, I think we should be throwing out some gratitude as well. This has been a crazy year, and I think it's worth acknowledging kind of the effort that everyone's put into this, both sides of the fence, our side, client side, everyone in the world really. So hopefully we get to that and make sure that we, we share the love.
Yeah, so let's do some good, the bad, the ugly, and let's work from cup half empty towards cup half full.
Well, what a year for that, right?
Yeah. So let's start with Ukraine. What an absolute shit show. We were at a retreat. You were out on the golf course. We've been doing a bit of planning for what happens if, and then suddenly BBC News 24 kicks in, and it's the oh shit moment. I think you were out on the course with Ryan and Nikolai, right? Two of our other founders. Talk us through your emotions as that kicked in, mate.
It was, I think that concept of what if was the most important one at that time, because no one ever really thinks something like that is going to happen. And particularly when you are talking every week with people that are there, planning what you're doing the next week, planning about the growth, planning about supporting people, planning about celebrating wins and, and hiring staff, to have that one phone call. I think we're on the 6th hole at Warkworth, and the news came in, Slack just blew up, and Nico and I jumped on a phone call with Yevgen in Kiev at the time and just said, what's going on? And the first thing was, they've crossed the border, and there's conflict and there's rockets. And then the second question is, where are our people and what are they doing? And that's when you really grasp the scale of a country like Ukraine. It is just massive. Huge. And our people were distributed all over the place, right? From the east, in Kharkiv and down in Odessa, really close to the, a lot of those conflict areas, through to Kiev, which was being heavily attacked, and then further into the west near the borders as well. Just crazy to really understand what people were going through on that day, and then for the following months, right? I think we're at day 288 of that conflict at the moment. So I think there's no book that's been ever written for founders and CEOs to help you really plan for and then understand how to operate through that. But I'm really proud of two things. I'm proud of the way that our people showed resilience through that. I think the Ukraine people as a whole decided that wasn't going to define who they were. Our people turned up every day. They supported each other. Our teams locally jumped on board and supported each other, from donations to just sending out messages and calls directly to the people that they work with. So the thing I'm proudest of most is the family approach that we took. Look after our people first.
Yeah, I think for me, dude, it was the first time that I've really felt that kind of fight or flight emotion kick in. Do you know what I mean? And you saw other corporations absolutely withdraw themselves from all locations, right? And it's like, okay, fair enough. You need to kind of have a Belarus, Russian strategy and extract yourself from there. But you saw institutions completely withdrawing themselves and trying to relocate the entire business. And I think a lot of that comes down to guttural reactions. I think what I'm proud of, I agree with you, the reaction from our partners, our staff, but also from our clients, right? We did not have a single client that turned around to us and said, screw you, we're more worried about our own business. It was actually a lot of how do we help, and the resilience shown through them and that supporting, I think, speaks volumes of the partnerships we've built and that depth of empathy in those relationships, if I dare to say it. But I think as a leadership team, what I'm proud of is that we literally acted within hours. Right? It wasn't a let's see what happens in a couple of weeks' time. Let's talk to the CFO, let's hedge our bets. It was a what do you need? What do you need? And getting behind those people. And I don't think it was from any place other than a truly heartfelt place of all of the owners of the business of this is it's our work family, right? And it extends beyond just those individuals, but it goes to the husbands, wives, children, parents, and that whole relocation. So looking back on that now, mate, almost a year, right, from when that kicked in, we had to make some structural changes to the business as well. And, we had to, while supporting those people, we also had to do some de-risking as well. So we opened up, obviously, in Vietnam and in Brazil. How do you see that that's going to evolve? Do you kind of feel that Ukraine's back on its feet and will go back to being that powerhouse in, not just the European, but the global economy? What do you think comes around the corner from there?
I mean, firstly, I think talent is talent, right? So
100%.
There's just such a wealth and depth of talent in Ukraine. That's why we went in the first place, right? You had that relationship with Yevgen prior to starting Overdose, and they've been day one, right? They've been there since we started, and they've been really the backbone that's allowed us to do what we do. And that's not going to change. I think the way that we operate, how we deliver, the learnings that we've had over the last 6 years, really rely on that partnership and that relationship that we have globally with all of our people. But I think the guys in Ukraine really have helped us develop that heart and soul of what we do and how we do it. So that's not going to change. I think, one of the big things that has changed is the distribution of our people, right? Not only setting up the offices in Vietnam, really our launch into the US, determining that we need some people in a closer time zone down in Brazil, but also the distribution of our people from Ukraine, right? We've got people now who have left and who are operating out of Portugal, out of Switzerland, out of Germany, out of Romania, all over Europe, not just Eastern Europe as well. So that distribution will not change. Our approach to Ukraine stands firm and strong. We're not only dedicated to our people, but we're also dedicated to the country that helps support our business to where it is. So I think that doesn't go away. What does change is really the way that we operate to ensure that we are not in a place where surprises like that will happen again, that we're prepared both financially and in the relationships that we have with our teams and with our clients as well. So it's taught, personally, I think this has been one of the most educational years, but going through that process, I won't let us walk into anything like that without having a depth of preparation, knowing what could happen.
Yeah, I remember from my old ex-investment banking days when you had to do all of your annual risk assessments, and back then that was, where are you backing up data? Have you got a hot office to kind of relocate to? And I think as a founder, you kind of work from a position of eternal optimism all the time. And I was just having a chat with someone. I said, for me, 2022 was that when Tyson punches you in the face year, and it's like, oh fuck, we should have done a bit of planning around those pieces. I don't think we necessarily reacted as fast as we possibly could, but I certainly see other institutions, be it merchants, agencies, platforms, that are only starting to react now when those decisions should have been kind of 6 months ago. So jumping on from that, from the Ukraine, we then had kind of that whole political climate the whole economic climate that started to just turn to shit, to be honest. My gut feeling was that was kind of triggered by the UK, where they kind of came up with the worst fiscal policy ever in the world. That then just screwed FX markets, where everyone was dumping money over into the USD. I think we then, at that same time, that was sort of bookend with everyone coming out coming out from COVID, starting to go back in store. Off the back of that, you've got merchants that had forecasted straight line growth and assumed that COVID was now the new normal, whereas we all know it was a blip. And I think you also saw that on the product and platform side with, people raising huge money because they had incredible 2020s and 21s, and then suddenly they were massively overinvested on those platforms. So we're starting to see the recoil and the back end of that now with some layoffs through those platforms. I think over the past month, a lot of those COVID kind of businesses, you started to see a few of them fall over. Like, we had far too many grocery delivery apps, right? Too many of these pure plays that were epic COVID businesses, but didn't really exist in an omni-channel world. Do you feel that we're kind of at the back end of that, or is there still another 3 to 6 months of pain? And we'll see, because I'm a believer that you have to see collapses to see the recovery. Do you know what I mean? So you have to open up that net new positive space in the market for people to fill into. But yeah, what's your vibe on sort of like the economic state of the world? Because my view is that we've bottomed out and we're starting to come back through. But I'm always the optimist that it'll happen next week, but it never does.
Well, it depends on what metrics you're running it by. But if you use the US dollar as your litmus for that, right? And I know that there's a firm belief that the US is really the environment where you will see the fastest bounce back because of the size of the economy and the approach that they have. But we're already seeing that US dollar bounce back from its, 52 cent lows to the New Zealand dollar at least, to now 63 cents, right? So we've got this. I think we're seeing that economic recovery that will be stimulated by that FX space. But if you look back, like on our 6 years, we've had 3 years of just solid economic, great economic conditions and good growth. We hit COVID. That was really the boom time for a lot of online businesses, and we saw that come through. If you look at what happened during that period, the investment that went into ensuring that your online was up to spec and you could meet customer expectations in a purely digital way, that investment was significant, right? And the tech companies, a business like ours really benefited from that. To expect it to be an ongoing thing, I think was foolish. I think, we looked at it and our forecasts were optimistic off the back of that. We're pretty close to where we thought we would be, but there are definitely businesses out there. Remember the statement that came out of Shopify, right? When they said we got it wrong, to admit that and to say we are now laying off 10% of our staff because we got it wrong. I think that's a pretty seismic statement for the industry that we're in at the moment. Are we bouncing back? Definitely. I think it's been really interesting time looking at the cyber weekend, for example. Understand out of there. If you look at what our clients have traded over this year, last year I think there was about 3.1 billion in transactions. This year is 3.8 billion, right? It's not the significant growth we saw year on year from 20 to 21, but it's still, over
25, 30% up?
Yeah, it's still great growth, right? Is this going to pass? Yes, absolutely. We've seen it historically. When's it going to pass? I'd say it'll fall from the US first, right? So the US will come back and then we'll see it trickle down, right? And that's good for us, right? When we spend a lot of money in USD, it's definitely good for us.
Yeah, and so how have you seen across that global merchant base how merchants are spending their cash? Because I think that's been one of the biggest sea changes for us, right? Of where people catching up in COVID, doing literally the oh shit, let's do a digital transformation in 6 months and throw as much cash as we can at this, otherwise we're going to collapse. So now moving to much more of a trading and sweating your assets mindset, would you say?
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think one of the big things that has changed in the second half of this year is both a cautious approach to spending money to grow, right? So I think there's been a shift to going, how do we milk our assets in the best way, right? How do we ensure that we're meeting customer expectations, that we are helping service them in the ways that they want to be serviced, both online and offline? how do we use the information that we've gained through 2 years of pure digital interaction to inform the way that we organize, our seasons, that we stock stores, that we go through promotions, that sort of stuff. I think the November period was always going to be that, man, I really hope we can, hit some big numbers here and help catch up. And I think that's been typical of the years before, but more so this year. The Christmas period's going to be telling. And if you look at card spend data, it's still up year on year as everyone would expect. Probably not as much, but it's still up. So I think that cautious approach by seasoned merchants will benefit them to no end, because they'll ride through this period and be smarter and stronger because of it. But as you said, right, we've seen players pop up and fall over because of this, of being too optimistic about it, right? Of putting money ahead of protection in some ways. But it's also short term, right? It will not, it can't last, because the world wants to be in a more positive space, right? That's a human emotion. I strive to be happy. So
yeah, I couldn't agree more. Hey, Raven, just want to pop up that question from Daniel. So long question here, but basically the whole context here is, with that movement away from pure plays and coming into a omni-channel way of thinking, how do we start thinking about that? So Daniel, I think that's a really good question, and we recently did a workshop for one of our largest omni-channel merchants, and I actually think one of the biggest trends you're going to see coming into 2023 is genuinely a proper understanding of omni-channel. Now, we were talking about this shit 2019, 2020. COVID happens, gets thrown out of the water, right? So, doing all that work of hooking up your POS systems to your e-commerce systems to your email and making sure you've got all that single view, I think we're actually bringing a lot of that work back to the fore. I think what you'll also see is this continued rise of customer data platforms, and getting a genuine, proper understanding of who your customer is, right? So this is not just about what did they buy and what can I recommend them to sell more. It's getting into size, fit, relationship. Who is my point person in store, right? Now, the biggest sea change that has to happen through there is actually nothing to do with e-commerce. It's nothing to do with stores. It starts with the CFO and CEO of brands, where they have to stop having line items on their balance sheet, which is online revenue and offline revenue, right? The whole market has to move to this KPI of lifetime value of a customer, right? Now, when the merchants get that and they realize that those transactions are not separate, an online transaction is not separate to an in-store transaction, it's the customer which is the unifying piece there. And that's literally as a message being driven by Google through how they've completely rebuilt the whole of the analytics structure, right? Is that, oh shit, sessions don't make sense. Some people take 8, some people take 2, right? Sessions don't make sense. Customers make sense, right? And we all know that our very, very best customers, they shop omni-channel, right? And they'll shop wherever the hell they want to shop, right? So I think the biggest movement, and where I see changes of the psychology of retailers, is genuine omni-channel approach, not just trying to sync data, but having a fundamental view of who your customer is and how you migrate a customer through a journey and a life cycle with brands. And look, there's technology that can help with that. But if you haven't got that from the top-down approach, and you're still looking at a P&L, and you're still being judged on what's my conversion rate, what's my online revenue, those are useful indicators, right? But that's not the genuine business outcome, right? And we have to grow the entire brand, not just the individual channels. Now, Paul,
those metrics I think are really important, right? Like they're after the fact metrics. They're the things that happen after a customer's made a decision. I think there's a move that's happening in it. And look, we've talked about this in circles, I think, for years and years and years. But that move to understanding those moments of influence, way back when I think Google coined the phrase zero moment of truth, that sort of stuff. I think the data that we have now, particularly influenced by the last 2 years of digital interaction, can really surface those moments of influence that matter in that decision-making journey from a customer. Once you understand that, you then understand where you invest. You understand what money makes the most sense in order of attracting a customer and then influencing them through to a transaction. You then also value that customer in a different way because you understand the repetitive nature of their purchasing as well. So those moments of influence, being able to surface that data and translate that into insights, I think that's the big thing. It's really easy to get hooked up on those old metrics that we think are the ones that are important. Are we getting a high return on ad spend? Are we what's our conversion rate look like? What's our bounce rates? That sort of stuff, right? These are metrics that matter in the context of understanding those moments of influence. And when we can get to that point, I think we understand the customer better. We provide better service, right? And let's never forget that role of service. And we can keep those customers for a long period of time.
Yeah, and part of my view on this, Paul, is that we're kind of going back to some old school marketing strategies, right? It's your recency, frequency, and monetary value, right? And I think what's actually happened, if you take a slightly higher, longer view of this and, look over 10, 15 years, is that the internet became a place to do very, very cheap advertising, right? And to drive immediacy of transaction. And we started to build these very transactional relationships with our consumer that became price and availability focused rather than brand value focused, right? And if we go back to, when you and I were growing up in the 80s and 90s, to actually go and do a transaction, you had to go in store, right? Or maybe a bit of mail order.
With cash, right?
Yeah.
With cash.
Right. And so I think with convenience is that it actually made marketeers a little bit lazy, and with relatively low cost of acquisition of clients, the internet kind of just becomes that kind of spam and push place. And people then go through this cycle of, I need to optimize it. We're now at this point in the world of critical mass on the internet where there is too many people trying to squeeze into that one shopping space. So naturally, all of those costs go up, right? And as costs go up, you then have to start thinking, right, I can no longer go with this, just hammer the crap out of the market. And I need to actually build depth of relationship and retain my merchant as opposed to trying to buy every transaction. Do you know what I mean? So I think that a lot of these trends for next year will also move into a level of restraint in marketing where we are building values in those relationships, be they through your social credentials, your eco credentials, but also just your core brand values, right? And actually having a genuine relationship with the merchant and not just trying to chase the next transaction. I think we'll see a movement back towards that. I'm not quite sure what it looks like, but
yeah, I mean, the question I would challenge all businesses to ask is, what do we want to be known for, right? If we're interacting with customers, what do we want to be known for? Is it service? Is it quality of product? Is it range? Is it, what is it that is going to set us apart, right? Because the competition's only going to get greater. And the accessibility internationally to more competition is, it's at your fingertips, right? So what is it that we're going to be known for locally, or what are we going to be known for in terms of, retention of customer, in terms of longevity of that relationship, right?
Yep, couldn't agree more, dude. Daniel actually just threw in an extra comment there of, there you go, Raven's thrown it up. But essentially what we're saying here is that the opportunity, and good shameless plug of .digital, Daniel, but the opportunity here of omnichannel often gets lost in the internal operations of the business, where you've got a digital team who are only KPI'd based on digital sales, right? So you get someone in your email address book and you want to keep that person shopping through that internal channel, right? If you change that KPI and say, right, your in-store staff and your online staff are all motivated by what is my average lifetime value of a customer, and then you recognize my best customer shops across all my channels, you then start using your digital data to push them in store. So the SMSs, the emails, right? All those kind of things. So again, you've got to have operational change inside the business and reframing that mindset rather than just buying more bits of kit. Because we've certainly seen people over the last 2 years, Paul, buy some very expensive pieces of kit, but not actually have the mindset to drive the value off the back of that.
Yeah, I think that goes into that what does it look like next year question, right? So I think one of those things is, what is the cost of ownership, right? What have I bought, and then how am I maximizing that, or am I getting the value out of it long term that I need to, right? If you look at software, for example, right, licensing terms are typically 2 years, right? If you kind of jumped on the bandwagon in 2020, like, we're now coming through licensing cycles again. I think we will see people, merchants particularly, asking about the value they receive. And that's the right question, right? If you want to make sure that you're maximizing the opportunity with your customer base, that you understand who they are, you've got you're emailing and sending them SMS, they're driving people in store or online. Are you getting value out of it, or are you not using what you've got to its best ability? And if you're not getting the value out of it and you are using it, then you've got to question what you've got. But if you're not using it to the best of its ability, then now's the time to really start milking it.
So I think that there's a couple of other factors that drive that as well, right? Where with some of those layoffs that we talked about earlier, the positive that came off the back of that is that it actually was a bit of a redistribution of talent as well, because it put a lot of talent on market, right? And we as employers, we've been through that process of where in 2020, 2021, you couldn't find people to work, right? It was an absolute employees market. That switches suddenly, and it puts a lot more talent in market. I think what happens off the back of that is that you start to see a lot more talent on the merchant side. So, again, 5-7 years ago, we'd go into conversations and no one would have a clue what we were talking about. Do you know what I mean? It was all smoke and mirrors. Whereas now that level of competency has improved dramatically merchant side. And also, a lot of those retailers are hitting these 20, 30, 40% of revenue coming through online channels. So they're looking to reduce some of that cost, but also internalize some of the talent and reduce the risk on just having a agency or a partner that is doing all this work for me and there's magically a number. So I think that, well, I'll ask you, do you see a change in the agency to merchant relationship, and does that become hybridized? Are we moving more in towards the consulting or back into the doing? How do you see that relationship evolving?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, right? Like if you look at the end of last year and the beginning of this year, I think our biggest concern alongside Ukraine was the cost of talent at that time, right? It was definitely an employees market. We were looking at people who were wanting 30 or 40% pay increases. We lost staff to $30,000 or $40,000 increases in their salaries. It was really a challenging time to understand what that market was going to look like and how sustainable it was going to be. And the reality was, like, businesses can't afford that type of baseline salary increase, right? And so we've seen it flatline a little bit, but I also think that move to merchants wanting to own more of the knowledge internally and wanting to control the direction a lot more, which I think it's almost essential, right? Like, I think if you give away the strategic direction of your infrastructure, your customer engagement platforms, your experience layers, I think if you give that away to someone else, you either trust that partner for a long-term relationship, which is great. We have many clients in that space, or you look to build that training connection between your agency partner and yourselves to upskill your own people as well. And we've seen that shift happening more and more now. I think it's just started, but we've now got, I think, more interesting conversations happening with some of our merchants around, what is it that you're actually doing? Why are we doing it this way? Could we be doing it a different way? And that type of conversation is so much better for the relationship than I've just got to get this done, I've just got to get that done, I've just got to get this done, right? Those why conversations are, so much more powerful about building trust and building a clear and singular direction for the future as well.
Yeah, and I also think that when those relationships are based around critical thinking, that it moves into a value-based relationship rather than just a pure transactional bums on seats, hours for sale, tickets to close. And to be honest, it's what our crew want to be doing as well, right? They want to be adding value and ideating and pushing boundaries.
Yeah, definitely. I think where we get it wrong and we do get it wrong, is where we get complacent, right? Where we just assume that what we're doing is great, and we lose that perception of value with our client relationships. And being constantly curious and encouraging our clients to be curious about what's better, what's next, what can we do differently, is vital, and it's vital for us to challenge ourselves as well. And I'm really proud of the work that we've done internally to train our staff, to give them platforms of engagement, to ensure that we are listening to the things that matter to our people, so that they can be better at the jobs that they do. Right? They can have safe and supportive environments for themselves, meaning they can build those value-based relationships with our clients, right? Because ultimately, good people lead to good relationships, and if we're doing those two things, everything else should work. That's my theory, anyway. Hopefully, it's true.
Yeah, and I think just generically as a leadership team, the world seems to be pivoting faster, and it's almost like the amplitude's got bigger of change, and also the frequency has got tighter, right? And I think for any leadership team, it's having that constant finger on the pulse and having a genuine gut feel as to where every relationship and market trend is moving. Not necessarily being the first responder or reactor in those, but being very willing and open to instigate change through that process.
Being intimate with your business, I think, is a prerequisite to manage through that change, right? Understanding the impacts from a global. We've seen the biggest global shifts in a generation, right? We're talking about political, we're talking about conflict, we're talking about economic. Even if you think about the political environments that we've come out of, right? You mentioned the UK, that Brexit finally happened, and the impact that we're now seeing on Europe is, it's starting to be seen more overtly, right? It's not just a country that's exiting it, but it's a disconnect of a belief system, I think, from the two partners, right? From the European Union and from the UK. If you look at the political shifts in the US, right? I mean, this was the first year that we could travel in 2 years, and to spend time with our team in the US and to really understand that the ethos that they operate in just gave me so much hope for not just our business, but for the world that we work in, right? I left that time with them knowing that we are far more alike than we are different. And if we can have that approach, we can overcome so many more challenges, because we can operate on that common approach, that belief system that we look after people, that belief system that our relationships are most important.
Yeah. I think that's a incredible point. I guess for me, the acceptance of the speed of change of market and how the world has just accepted it. Even if you mentioned earlier, like the FX swings that we've seen from the US to the Kiwi. Now, just for those listening, the reason we monitor that is because our headquarters are in New Zealand. But we've literally seen over the course of a 6-month window, like 30% swings up and down, right? You see on the stock markets on the daily, it is not uncommon to see 5 to 10% swings in stocks and indexes, right? You take that back to the 90s, early 2000s, if it moved more than 1%, the market freaked out, right? And it was, everything was called a black something, right? And it was Black Friday or Black Monday. And so the world has almost got into this accepting view of that amplitude change. I fear for the world if it's going to get even faster and bigger, and how the world adapts to that. But it almost seems in that political view that you've almost got to be sensationalized now, right? Everything's, extremes of you're either left or right, and we've kind of lost that modicum of the moral majority of us just sit in a middle normal place. But it seems that the world is kind of being pushed out to these outer extremes. Anyway, I'm just gasbagging. You wanted to talk about things that we are grateful for. What are you grateful for, Paul?
I'm grateful for resilience. I think when you put people to the test that this year has provided, and to see not just people surviving but thriving in that, and I think the best of us steps forward and rises to the top. And if I look internally, finding a way to encourage our people to look after themselves, to ensure that they look after each other has been a really big thing for us. That resilience, not just from the people who are facing, some pretty terrible circumstances, but from the team to ensure that the support is there around them, to ensure that they protect them from the things that they don't need to worry about, and that they and ensuring that they get the support they need for the things they do need to worry about has been really, it's quite humbling to watch that happen. The other thing that I'm really grateful about is the rallying together around the businesses that have been with us for a long, long time. Right? If I look at the relationships that we've had since day one, and they're still here today, and we've done wonderful work together, and we're still pushing the boat forward, that excites me, right? Like 6 years working with people and still be able to do new stuff and still be able to think in different ways and add value. It's really exciting for me. I'm also grateful for the people that surround me as well, right? Like I took on this job as the CEO from you in May, and I think in that short space of time, I've had to do some pretty crazy things, things that I didn't ever plan on doing in my life. But having the team around me that allows me to just concentrate on the things I need to, and the trust that we all place in each other, that's huge, right? When you're business partners and co-workers, and we have a shareholding base that's large, and to know that everyone turns up every day wanting to do the best for each other and for the business, you can't help but be thankful for that.
I could not agree with you more and echo everything in there. And I think that if there was a word that wraps up 2022, it's that resilience. Tough times pass. It's made us stronger. It's forced us to make decisions that we'd probably been avoiding for a long time. As I say, it's that punch in the face moment, and it's like, oh shit, we better invent a plan. And yeah, I think we all come out of this a lot stronger. And now I'm optimistic for what next year has in store. And I think we are going to be incredibly well positioned to, service a growing group of clients and really take them on that journey to success as well. Raven, do you just want to throw up Jody's question? Thank you for generic Googled question, Jody. Paul, what do you think is the most important trait of a leader? Shall I go first?
Yeah, you go first.
I don't think that there is one trait as a leader, Jody. I think for me personally, the values that I try to embody, and in fact, let me paraphrase this. The way that we lead Overdose is we have this concept of duopoly leadership that we push through all of our business, right? So the way that Paul and I lead the business is it's my job to look upwards and outwards and kind of be the optimist. And it's Paul's job to be the realist and the practical person that looks inwards and downwards. I think if you have a leader that is trying to do both, because I tried to do that, it's virtually impossible, and you end up doing a half-assed job at both of those, right? And we have replicated that model into our offices through MDs and general managers and through our teams with leads and directors in there. So I think the traits of a leader depend which part of that job you are supposed to be doing. Are you supposed to be driving forwards upwards, or are you supposed to be looking after all of the people behind you, right? So you've either got to lead and everyone follows you, or you pull the people with you. Now, for me, in that role, I think optimism is actually incredibly important, and that needing to stay optimistic, because when the world is when the world's collapsing around you, you need that person that can be calm, resolute, but also see where is the light and where is the exit in there. The other thing I think is important is defaulting to trust. So having a genuine trust of the people around you, and they are not there to earn your trust, right? And you default to that trusting situation. And if you want to deliver trust, you have to be authentic, right? And to be authentic, you have to have a level of transparency. And I think that we've exuded that from day one in the business, and tried to give the people sometimes we've given our staff too much information, to be honest, of where we've overshared a problem that we've had to solve. But I think having those right levels of transparency, so everyone knows where the direction of the business is going and the pain that we're going through, assists in kind of having that direct empathy with the person around you. Right? So for me, it's optimism, trust, authenticity, and transparency. Paul, you're allowed. I chose 4. That means you can only choose 1.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really interesting when we talk about this between you and I, because it really does talk to that duopoly of leadership, right? Because that is your job. Your job is to be the optimist, to be the kind of forward thinker in this, and that's, we haven't got where we are today without that doggedness, and I appreciate that so much. For me, I think as a leader, there's a couple of things. One is you have to be curious always, right? As soon as you think that you've clocked this game, that's when everything will come falling down around you. And so that curiosity should bring some degree of humility, right? That you don't know everything, and that this is a learning journey, not we haven't reached an end. There is no end. And I think the last thing is, I can't really find the word for it. So I want to say intimacy, but it's not quite that. It's an empathy for people around you, to know when the right time to make a decision and when the right time to ask for opinions. And if you look at the swings and roundabouts of our business, right, there have been times when we've been really open and gone, right, this is a shared decision, and we've got to, everyone's going to be a part of that. And there are times when, you just have to make the call, and knowing when to do it and when not to do it. And that's the hardest thing, and that's where that curiosity comes in, right? And having people around you, as you say, that you just trust to be able to bounce shit off, right? Without that, man, it's a lonely place to be if you're a leader without that support.
Yeah. And I would say, on that journey to leadership, and we've got a lot of guys that are on that kind of growth curve, the biggest trait you need to become a successful leader, and it's not a trait of leadership, it's a trait of how do you do the journey, is self-awareness, right? And it's that, I think the biggest fundamental change I saw in myself as a human was when I stopped worrying about the things I was crap at, right? And you accept that I'm not good at that. I'm going to bring somebody in around me to fill that space. And if you are constantly bringing similar personalities into the room, all you end up doing is amplifying a single point of view, and you're just in that echo chamber, right? So surrounding yourself with people who will disagree with you, have a genuinely comparative point of view, but can eloquently explain that, right? So when you get to that point of leadership, it's actually channeling in and focusing on the strengths rather than trying to be, a Lionel Messi that can play every pitch on the park. Do you know what I mean? You've got to choose your position.
What a wonderful player, though. What a wonderful player.
So, it's literally, use that analogy in a soccer team, right? You can only play one position, and it's choosing that position and then being world-class at that position, and not trying to go to some goalkeeper training and defender training if you're trying to be a winger. Do you know what I mean? And I think that's what I see a lot of people getting wrong in that early leadership game, is they think they have to be the bee's knees at everything in the business, and you fundamentally don't. You need to be able to know who are the people that can do that, and then be able to amplify your own strengths. And I see a lot of people get that wrong.
I mean, interesting from your perspective, right, as a founder, alongside Ryan, to let go of some of that stuff, right? And I imagine that as a founder, to have gotten it wrong tends to burn you from, wanting to try again. But that belief that ultimately you can't control everything, so control the things you can control, and then bring in other people to help with the things you can't. I think that's been really instrumental to us being able to do what we do, and for us, getting to the place that we're in now, right? Which is, if someone had sat down with you, back in 2016 and gone, "Hey, you're going to be
way beyond expectation, man."
Yeah, it's crazy, bro.
But I think if I was having a chat with one of the team over a beer the other night, and saying, "Oh, you're such a risk taker." It's like, well, I don't see myself as a risk taker, right? The way I actually see that we've grown this business is actually almost kind of really good spread betting, right? And it's like, right, I've got 10 bets I can place this year, and we're really good at, winning on 7 or 8 or 9 of those bets, right? I think what I had to get over as a founder was wearing those losses. Do you know what I mean? Because you'd wear the loss really fucking hard. And I've slowly got better at going, although some of the losses have got bigger, Do you know what I mean? And they hurt more, but it also means at scale, the wins are better wins through there. And you get used to that winning mentality, so you wear those losses. So, one of my growth things is that ability to celebrate the wins. Yeah. All right, one last one from Sam Elliott. Trying to throw his question up. What is the biggest mistake you have made this year, and what lessons has this taught you for 2023? I'll let you go first on that, Paul.
Yeah. So one of the lesson that I learned hardest this year was expecting someone else to pick up a problem that I saw and to do something about it, right? And I'll put it into a little bit more context, right? When you start to see and feel that things aren't quite right, not acting on it is almost as bad as doing it yourself, I think. And the greatest mistake I made this year was not acting on two things that I saw happening and making it a priority. Putting my attention in other places and just hoping that it would fix itself. So I think as a leader, and this comes down to leadership, helping to identify challenges in the business and strategies to overcome them at pace is key.
One for you. It's all right. Let it pass. Are you done?
What about you? What was your biggest mistake?
So I actually think
this feels quite cathartic almost, doesn't it? Right? Like just
it does. Yeah, we're gonna bring Sam in for some counselling. I would say my biggest mistake. I think that when we went through all of the Ukraine stuff and the economic downturn. I know there was a week where I just sat there staring at FX charts and just starting to cry as I looked at the screen because, we're very exposed to the US dollar. I think that there was probably a 3 to 6 month period where I fell into a protection mentality as opposed to a growth mentality, right? And I started to poke my nose into areas of the business that I previously released myself from. Do you know what I mean? And then you start poking your nose into, how's this person running their P&L? And you start panicking over the small bits, which, fundamentally is not my job within the business. And there are other people that are paid to do that. But as as a founder and a shareholder, you're genuinely inquisitive through that. So I think that there was opportunity missed, especially through Q2 and Q3, where we probably focused on surviving and not thriving, if you know what I mean. And we certainly went through that mentality, and I allowed myself to drop into that view because that's what everyone else was doing, when actually I should have been playing in the opposite space. And how do we continue to accelerate that business through there? So I guess the learning off the back of that is a phrase that Paul hates, which is know your role. But I'm saying that about myself, which is to genuinely understand that my role is not to do that anymore. Yes, I may have founded the business, but now my job is X, Y, and Z. So it comes back to what I was saying about self-awareness and kind of staying in lane and trusting everyone else to deliver on those pieces. And I've personally struggled with, we've gone from a business of 500K to 50 million, and the impact of a 2% mistake in the business has gone from, a 10K, 20K mistake to $1 million mistake. Do you know what I mean? So naturally, you want to have your kind of nose in there. And that was fucking woolly. Sorry, Sam. Alrighty, so let's wrap up. Last one. What are you optimistic for in 23, Paul?
What am I optimistic? I am optimistic about watching the leadership changes that we've made in the business come to their fruition, right? I think about, putting Laura into the CEO of Australia role. I think about what that means for people like, the team around her and how they're going to step up and both support her and be supported by her. It's a big move for us to bring someone into that role and put all that responsibility on them. If I think about the changes that have been occurring in the US and just the powerhouse team that has been built out there, if I look at our founding office in New Zealand, right, like the number of people in this company now that have the potential to grow into just phenomenal, not just leaders, but operators that we could never have imagined that we would have, 5-6 years ago, right? Like I think about how we used to work when we first started, and the level of quality and confidence and intelligence that we now have in this business that we've managed to attract into it.
So you're thinking back to the times where I refused to let the team have a project management software.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember those days as well. Yeah.
I think, what could we achieve? I'm most optimistic about what we could do.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think some of the changes we put in place, we merged in an incredible agency called Noodle this year, which has fundamentally changed our capabilities in composable architectures. We'd been building some stuff internally. We've merged Dan's team in. So I'm really optimistic for where those changing winds of commerce platforms, especially at that enterprise scale, are happening. And there's a stacked pipeline of opportunities out there, and it's getting us into a different shape of retailers that are starting to talk to us, which we hadn't spoken to before. I feel that we've now got to a position where the level of independence that our individual offices are having, both through their economic success and that growth of leadership and the stability of those teams, I'm optimistic that we can be hands off, as you say, not distant, but releasing those shackles and really letting that entrepreneurial flair come out from all of those leaders and their teams behind them. And I think, possibly that's long overdue. And I'm also optimistic that the markets will change. And I think when we see the bounce back, it'll happen faster than people expect. I talked earlier about that frequency and amplitude increasing. When it bounces back and the markets choose it bounce back, it'll bounce back aggressively. It'll be a bit wobbly on the way up, but I think it'll happen faster. And I'm also optimistic that there's just no more bloody wars, and that we can just get back to some normal trading environments and hopefully things that we can control, right? And have some of those elements of control passed back to us, because that for me was the hardest part of 2022, when you've got foreign exchange and international wars and, fiscal policies. You suddenly realize that your business isn't wholly within your control, right? And there are factors out there that are stronger than yourself. So you have to really go with the waves. You've got no choice but to follow the tides sometimes through there. And there's only so fast you can swim back against them. Cool. All right, my man. You're sitting in the office next to me, so I'll give you a digital Merry Christmas and have a wonderful break with the family and children. But I'll see you for a beer tonight as well.
Yeah, and just to everyone that supported us, to all of our clients, all of our staff, all of our partners, we can't do this without you, and we appreciate every single one of you, and wish you all a safe and happy time over the break with your families, and hoping for sun and sand between your toes, unless you're in the Northern Hemisphere, in which case I hope there's some fresh powder outside for Christmas Day.
Love it. Thank you, everybody.